It is my honor and privilege to welcome students, faculty, and honored guests to this Veterans Day Assembly. It is right and proper that we take time out of our day to recognize the sacrifice and pay tribute to those in the military who have served and continue to serve to protect our freedom and our American way of life. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the fighting of World War I ended in 1918. Due to the conclusion of the war to end all wars, November 11th became a universally recognized day of celebration. The day was originally declared Armistice Day, years after the end of World War I, and honored only veterans of that war. In 1954, after World War II and the Korean War, it was renamed Veterans Day to honor all men and women who served America in war and defended our democracy. So today, we honor all of our veterans who unselfishly placed their lives on the line for our freedom. Those men and women were ordinary people until they heard the call of duty and answered it. They left their families, their homes, and their lives, not for recognition or fame. They put their lives on the line or sacrificed their lives so that we could have the right to live as a nation of individuals who can freely express our individuality without ever losing focus of the fact that we are all Americans. For this, our veterans deserve our deepest respect and our unwavering gratitude. Our assembly today is one of the highest decorum. As we honor our veterans, I respectfully ask that all in attendance assist us as we proceed with reverence and respect. At this time, please stand as the colors are posted by Staff Sergeants Dricken and Nadu of the United States Army. Please stand. At this time, Senior President Joe Bruno will now give the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing.
Stripes and
may be seated. Before our main speaker, we will now have a selection from our choir. Give me your tired and your poor, and then our band with our national march. Thank you, band and choir. Before we move on for our featured speaker, we'd like to recognize a few people who you may or may not know. First of all, from the American Legion, we have Mike Kubica and Stan Makita. And I see there are a few other members of the Legion here also. Is that accurate? And we'd like to welcome them also to our celebration. We are always honored for an appearance by Canfield High School alumni, former military man, Mayor Duffett, a great friend of Canfield High School. Please give him a very nice round of applause. Mayor, thank you for showing up. At this time, our featured speaker will be introduced by Ben Janik. Ben?
Good morning. It is a pleasure for me to introduce a speaker that has a very special place in my heart. That speaker would be my father, Colonel Joseph Janik. My father is currently the wing commander at the Youngstown Air Reserve Station. This location is currently his 15th assignment since he began his Air Force career back in 1989. He has logged over 7,000 hours of flight time, as well as having to serve in Operations Iraqi and Enduring Freedom in the war on terrorism. He's achieved all this while also being a loving husband and father of 3. It is my honor to introduce my father, Joseph Janik.
Good morning. Where's my other son, Ryan? Where's he at? There he is. Hi, back there in the freshman group. All right. Brought a bag of Twizzlers for me. I thought I'd start off with a story. I got a lot of stories. If we want to spend a few hours in the auditorium out of class, I don't know. We got to talk to the principal about that. We'll see what he says. I found myself in 2006 in Entebbe, Uganda, flying multiple missions. We're flying out of Djibouti. It's in the Horn of Africa. So we're down in Entebbe, getting some gas, downloading some cargo. Entebbe is also another famous location back in the late 70s. Famous raid took place there. See part of the airport still filled with bullet holes when Israeli Special Operations Force came in and retook some hijacked passengers off a airplane. But we landed there. Great folks met us there, getting us some gas, taking care of our cargo, and I walked outside the airplane. I had a bigger bag of Twizzlers, right? We see this, take this common piece of candy, and I walked outside the airplane, and I'm eating a couple pieces of licorice, and then before you knew it, I had about 20 grown men from Uganda standing around me, and I'm handing this licorice out, and you would have thought I was handing out bars of gold to these gentlemen. Something that we just take for granted in everyday life, and we take many things for granted, and we owe what we do have blessed in our lives, owe it to our veterans. So it's an interesting mission down there, and just handing out the candy. And so I carried candy, multiple missions. I carried chocolate, licorice, because you never know who you were going to meet, and it was the best way to continue foreign relations as we went to some of those places and those countries in Africa. So the principal mentioned it this morning. What was Veterans Day called before it was Veterans Day? Yes, ma'am. Make sure this gets back to the young lady in the back there. Well, thank you for the invitation to be here this morning. Thank you, Principal Moldovan. Thank you. Welcome to the mayor for joining us. Thank you, Benjamin. Proud of all my children. Benjamin, Ryan's in the back. My other daughter, Rachel, is over in the middle school. And I would like to recognize any of the veterans that are with us this morning. If you please stand, or if you're up on the sides, please be recognized. Thank you to you. Thank you for your service. I don't think it's inappropriate to introduce myself. I'm the man who accompanied my beautiful wife this morning to the event at the Canfield High School. So thank you for joining us, Annette. Why are we gathered here this morning? Well, it's not only a day off for some or shortened classes for others. We are here today to honor those who honored our country with its highest level of service. We owe our thanks, our respect, and our freedom to the veterans of the United States. The United States military is one of the most diverse institutions in the country. From every corner of the country, every shade, every religion, those men and women are forged into one common service. So what do you think of when you hear the word veteran? Maybe first to help, first to serve. Many may not tell that they're veterans or tell their stories of heroism. Many of our veterans fulfilled their duties and now live normal lives, many going unnoticed. Others are more famous in their service to our country. President John F. Kennedy served in World War II as a patrol torpedo boat commander. He used his family affluence to get into the fight. August 1943 in the Solomon Islands in the Pacific, on a dark, starless night, a Japanese destroyer came out of the dark and crashed into his PT-109 boat and cut her in two. With 13 on board, 2 died from the crash. Kennedy took one of the men in tow for 5 hours to reach an island, hoping the Japanese were not there. His Harvard swimming skills put to the test. Over several days, he swam to different islands and treaded water in hopes of being rescued. But then came upon island natives But then he came upon island natives where he took a coconut, a simple coconut, and scratched in it 11 alive, native nose posit, or position, and Reefs Nauru Island, Kennedy. So one of the natives took the coconut and paddled off. A couple days later, a pickup of him and his men was coordinated. That coconut that saved him and his team sat in the White House office as a reminder of those harrowing days. President Kennedy would be further tested about 20 years later during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where it was discovered that nuclear missiles were in Cuba. JFK set up a naval blockade when his military advisors wanted to attack Cuba. The naval blockade worked as the Soviet Union turned one of its cargo ships around that was heading to Cuba. A small item such as a coconut helped him to survive to become president, where he said, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us ill or well, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty." It's an honor to serve alongside fellow airmen, soldiers, seamen, Coast Guard, and Marines. Approximately only 0.5% of the U.S. population serves in the military forces today. Since you have been in existence, the United States has been involved in what is called America's Forever War. The burden of nearly 2 decades of war, nearly 7,000 dead and 50,000 wounded, has been largely sustained about 1% of the population. Leading up to the 2018 midterm elections, it was polled that 42% of Americans did not know whether we were still at war with Afghanistan. Since October of 2001, our reserve and guard forces have transitioned from a strategic U.S. asset to a full operational force constantly training and deploying, ready to answer our nation's call. The men and women here locally at the 910th Airlift Wing have known that all too well. Recently deployed and redeployed several hundred of our members, currently have about a handful deployed overseas as we speak today. Many deployed into harm's way. All the while knowing that the mission of the Air Force is to fly, fight, and win, because losing is not an option. How blessed are we to live in these United States, where all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We are grateful for the service of our veterans. We also cannot give enough credit to our military families, who at times have the hardest job of all. They are the unsung heroes who help to sustain us. Our spouses and families stand behind us as our service members deploy to all corners of the world and continue to ensure our households keep running. So how do you thank a veteran? You thank that veteran with kindness, you serve, you volunteer, and you pay it forward. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. May God bless our veterans and those currently serving and deployed in harm's way, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Janik, for your words and for your service to our country. It was a pleasure having you here. We are now going to have a selection by our choir and then our band, and then we will end our ceremony with an explanation of taps, and one of our students will play taps as we exit the auditorium. So at this time, again, our choir and band will give us a selection.
America, Before we play our final selection, on behalf of the band and choir, and especially our guests, I want to thank you for being such an awesome student body this morning. It's really, really important that you demonstrate this kind of audience decorum on days like this, and I could tell you from my perspective, and I know Mr. Motivon will definitely echo it, you guys have been awesome, so we really appreciate that. Before we play, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you have a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, or a grandma or grandpa that serves in the U.S. military or has served? Raise your hand nice and high. Okay, this next song, you're going to help participate in it. We play, in service bands all across the country, play an arrangement of service songs on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and other gatherings where we honor America and our veterans. So this one happens to be called Armed Forces on Parade. And it has 4 of the 5 service songs in it. And the order is Army, Marine, Navy, and Air Force. Army, Marine, Navy, and Air Force. And so as is customary when it's played by a band, the veterans and the enlisted currently serving military personnel would stand during their service song. So we certainly want to do that. But this morning I want to do something special. If your family member served in the Army, you stand when it's played. When it's served in the Marine, you stand when it's played. Navy, you stand, and then Air Force. And I do apologize that if you have a family member that serves in the Coast Guard, our arrangement does not have that song, so I do apologize for that. Okay, we got it? Army, Marine, Navy, Air Force. Army.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, Mrs. Skurich, and your groups. It's a very nice touch there, Mr. Kelly. Very, very nice, and we did that. The last part of this ceremony deals with the playing of taps. You may have heard it before, most likely at the conclusion of a funeral, a military funeral, or any funeral. It's a bugle call played at dusk during flag ceremonies and again at military funerals of the United States Armed Forces. The official military version is played by a single bugle or trumpet. It is sometimes known as Butterfly's Lullaby or The Day is Done. A man named Horace Timm wrote a set of words intended to accompany the music. The tune is a variation of an early rendition titled Scott Tattoo, which was used from 1835 to 1860. Present-day taps was arranged by a Union Army brigadier. That's Army there, Mr. Duffett. General Butterfield, an American Civil War general and Medal of Honor recipient. Within months of the new arrangement, taps was adopted by both the Union and Confederate forces and officially recognized by the U.S. Army in 1874. Taps was originally used to signal lights out and signal that the day's events have concluded, and it is now time for soldiers to be at rest. With respect to our armed forces, we're going to have Josh Comport is going to play taps. In a second, we're going to ask you to rise. At the conclusion of taps, we're going to ask the junior side over here. You'll all be standing. At the conclusion, we would ask you row by row, starting at the front row, to silently move out of the auditorium and just go right to first block. Simultaneously, we would ask the sophomores to do the same thing, go out that way. And seniors, we would ask you to use the two middle rows, first row first, as we move through. So we ask you at this time to rise for the playing of taps.